What's happening?
Oh, the apocalypse is happening.
I'm just text my hands over.
How do you quite get the gravity situation? The apocalypse is happening.
I haven't seen it before. Text me my phone, okay?
Over the past few weeks, I've been accumulating a lot of stuff for the podcast, and it's obvious, given my background as a telemarketer, you know, as a teenager and all that stuff, I like to talk. And I don't like to talk really to hear the sound of my own voice. It's really just me gauging what the fuck is actually in my brain. And, you know, and thankfully there's been people that will listen and I can know exactly, am I making sense? And I'm telling you, that's actually a hell of a trial and error process, because everybody can end up saying stupid shit if you speak long enough and loud enough, perhaps, to where people can hear it. And it's kind of interesting to me that now I'm doing this on the internet, because actually, you know, it's more comfortable for me to do this. I don't know why. I guess because I'm in a comfortable setting in my room, and I'm just there. I'm here and there. I'm everywhere, you know, whatever. Yeah, last one was about the stages of grief that ranged from there's various degrees of emotions that people go through and how it can be applied to everything in your life. Now, coping mechanisms is something I feel like would be important to talk about. What is the solution to the grieving process? And there's never really a solution. There's just ways to cope and deal with it, much like how pain medication just actually more or less just tells you to deal with it, or become complacent with it. Your brain kind of lies to you about it, because, you know, the pain will be there as soon as it wears off, because it was always there. It's just, you know, you just got fucking monstrously high or something, you know, depending on the chemical or substance. This one also, I guess, could feed into the addiction narrative and the addiction process as well. And this is where you get the most common one, of course, is food, stress eating, snacking. And I think the main reason why it's bad is because of our metabolism and just how much we eat right before we go to sleep. And as you get older, I mean, obviously you just start to lose energy. I mean, it's just, and there's parts of your brain that just light up and is very aware of that. It's like, hey man, and I think it's awful to have a long-term memory, because you do have like vivid memories of how it felt, well, you know, when you were younger, how you could go and do pretty much anything on 4.5 hours of sleep, you know, or, you know, just having that freedom, or at least the ability to just gauge your sleep process. It's one of the things I talked about too, is in the last one, is about living with people. And I was talking with somebody about this, and it reminded me of the issues I had when I was living with somebody. She would wake me up in the middle of a deep sleep and yell at me for snoring, you know. Obviously, I was pissed. But after a while, you know, I came to the conclusion, it's like, maybe I should just sleep on the fucking couch, dude. Luckily, my couch was comfortable enough for that. It didn't bother me, and I think the problem was solved. But believe it or not, though, the more I thought about that, really think that is a deal breaker. That's actually something. There's two things I think, yeah, when it comes to the bathroom and fucking sleeping in the same bed together, these are two huge obstacles to get over when you're living with somebody for a while. That's either, you know, your long-term girlfriend or boyfriend or fiance, husband, wife. This is another obstacle. There's some people I know that are just never has any experience, and they're just jumping right into that with children. I'm telling you right now, if you're already having problems sleeping and being comfortable doing your thing and everything else at this point without getting married and have children or not, I'm just telling you, it should become obvious. That's not going to help at all, my friends, my listeners. The children thing is another thing too you have to consider. You're not sleeping. Basically what you're doing with children, especially during the beginning, first year, is essentially, it takes about a year for you to figure it out. Like, what you're just nodding off. It's like you're pretending to sleep. You end up sleeping well when you're not supposed to be sleeping well. That's a problem, you know. And given today's drug culture and the fact that a lot of people just simply don't fucking sleep with the work schedules and stuff like that, I think that might be the reason why cars have been flying into fucking houses. In my memory, In the last 3 or 4 years, this shit is becoming radically more popular. So the sleep thing, holy shit, do we take that shit for granted, especially as we get older. It's a battle. It's a constant battle. And I think our phones, the technology fucks with it big time. Just the constant alerts, or, you know, depending on how many networks or whatever you're involved in, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or all three, and then, you know, whatever. If you got apps for like sports or TV shows or whatever the fuck, bing, 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 there's always a constant notification, and you're constantly going to be picking the thing up and looking at it, swiping around. Speed typing with the fingers, the finger typing. The finger dance, if you will. So basically, it's a matter of figuring out how much stimulation do you need and what kind of stimulation is more beneficial. And that's tricky. For me, I like to go on Wikipedia and just swim in that. Even though it's not the most, accurate and reliable, it's still a bunch of information. It's something to think about. And daydreaming, I think, should be something that a lot of people should do more of when they have the time. And of course, daydreaming is something you don't do hardly at all, especially if in a family situation. The family unit. But yes, parents do not sleep. Parents get their REM sleep, usually inappropriate times, really. They're just fighting it. It's ironic. The stuff you need, you're fighting it. So that is a concoction that brings a lot of pain. A lot of suffering, a lot of just exhaustion, stress, depression. It's one sneaky little thing. It just builds up after a while as you get older. The age thing, man. You know, some people might not physically age, and it seems like, oh man, psychologically, no. I mean, it's just going to change. There's things that are going to fucking change. You have to understand that. Period. And I do think there is some truth to brain chemistry changing after a certain period, and it's different for men and different for women. Men, the frontal cortex, I think for both of us is at 25 or 27 or 26, so in that range. And I think that's for real, because if you can think about yourself at that age, you know, look at the moments and think about how you were physically and how you were, you know, your habits and all that stuff, rituals, routine, you know, what were you doing? What changed? So you have to take this into account. So yes, couples who sleep together well are going to make it. And the ones that don't sleep together well, and of course I'm not referring to sex. Sex is indeed part of it and can help. But I'm just saying, the ones that don't sleep well together can still manage their relationship. But I'm telling you, when it's an uneven balance, just like anything, in a give and take situation, where it's completely, seemingly unfair. And of course, these are things that are based off stuff that generally people have no control over. Yelling at people for snoring and stuff like that is a moot point. It's okay to be mad about it. It's frustrating. I get it. It's frustrating to the snoree in particular because they didn't know it. They don't know that. You know, they're asleep. They don't fucking hear it. I've heard stories, I think, where people can wake themselves up with snores. I've heard where people have farted in their sleep and woke themselves up, and that's horrifying and hilarious to me. I think that's really funny. That's nature's pie in the face. I'm sure back in our fucking hunter-gatherer days, there's been cavemen that woke themselves up with their fucking ferocious, god-awful farts, because we can only imagine, given the diet and situation, what those were like. I guess back then it was like grass farts. Which sounds like a good name for a band. But yeah, that's something we need to take into account. I think that a lot of it is stuff that you can't control, but it's a problem. It is. It's a real problem. And I think it does affect people's relationships in a great deal, even if you like sharing an apartment with somebody. I guess the atypical situation is when people go to college campuses and stuff is where they learn a lot from that. I always say that the social experience in college is the most important part of it, actually, outside of the piece of paper you get at the end of the course. But yeah.
those charismatic people in my entire life. Reflections of value is the kind of character that I present to you today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that your bones are chilling. I know that your blood is burning. I'm so excited. Wake up. Alright, clear up. You guys ready to rock? Put your arms up.
Let's be realistic. We're not going to get that 8 hours. And for those who do, my hat's off to you. I've tried the sleep aid method. I did that for a while, and it worked, but the recovery period is what got to me. Like, Benadryl would generally give me, like, just a really stabby / grouchy feeling for about 2 hours after I'm woken up. There's Unisom, the original, like, there's 2 different kinds of Unisom. It's still under the same brand name, but it's 2 different chemicals. I think the Unisom that I thought worked the best is pronounced doxylamine or doxylamine, succinate or succinate. If you can find that, give that a shot. That shit there's no fighting that off, and it's a nice sleep. It's a deep sleep. The problem is when you're using any kind of medication for sleep aid is tolerance. Because I noticed that with Benadryl when I used to, or Tylenol PM even, was eventually you're just in this weird restlessness. And that's, it defeats the purpose when you're just still up, but yet unproductive and shitty feeling, Then you get into the prescriptions like Ambien. It seems to be effective for sleep, but it also encourages a unconscious or completely unaware actions. If you can find, Google it. Just Google it. There's a lot of interesting stories about Ambien. Some people swear by it. A lot of other people are like, it's just a bizarre lobotomy, which is kind of like alcohol. Alcohol is it's the cheapest lobotomy one could get is alcohol, to be completely honest. I'm of the belief, a lot of people say that, alcohol just reveals the true nature of who you are and what you're hiding and all that stuff, or your true nature. And I think that might be true for some people, but I honestly think it turns you into the ape. It activates the ape genetics and just turns you into an asshole that can't walk. It's kind of like a kid trapped in an adult body, and you just impulsive and all that stuff, and you don't really think things through. You're just using like 3% of your brain, and that's just to manage to make noise out of your mouth and to walk somewhat. Yeah, the sleep thing is an important coping mechanism, and incrementally it does add up, and that's something we have to consider, and it does affect everything. So the stimulation part, I talked about how technology obviously stimulates the brain, but also literal stimulants like caffeine and sugar and all that stuff. And the problem with kicking that, and as anyone will tell you that has kicked caffeine. That's when you realize that, yeah, you're addicted, and also it's a drug. It's like anything else, because you get physical pain from not having that in your body, and you're just grouchy, shitty, useless to the world, as many people will attest to if they can't have their fucking coffee. Me personally, like, if I ever get to I like the taste of coffee, but, you know, much like beer and alcohol, I'm not just drinking that for the taste of it, obviously. And so I can't see myself doing decaf. And at that point, the power of placebo would probably really come into full view when consuming decaffeinated coffee. It's kind of like looking at non-alcoholic beer. So yeah, that's how I would approach the decaf. If it came down to decaf, I just wouldn't drink coffee, period. But one of the things I noticed as a hardcore caffeine addict for a long time, drinking water or just anything with electrolytes, then consuming your caffeine, or both at the same time, like Rockstar makes Rockstar Recovery, and the reason why I chose that is because it only has 3 grams of sugar per 8 ounces. Well, I guess in total it's 6 grams of sugar in a can, and it has like milk thistle extract, which is good for the liver, and a reasonable amount of caffeine, and it just does the trick, like, noticeably. I think it works better than just X amount more of caffeine. I think just the hydration does a lot. There's that, you know, or drinking a full bottle of water before you get into the coffee or tea. Just, that's one place to start. But yeah, and I think that's what fueled the unfortunate side of the drug culture that started, at least into my mind, in 2002-ish, 3-ish, with the meth thing. I think a lot of appeal of a lot of drugs is small glimpses into youthful experiences. You kind of just get that. It's like, oh man, I'm back to my old self again. And then you come down or whatever, and then you're like, well, nope, reality just set in. So yeah, there's that. Much like how, you know, things just, distractions, basically. Everything is distractions and stimulus, especially in today's culture. So it's already built right into the fabric of society that we don't sleep very well. No one does. Okay, so that will lead into dreams, right? I find, obviously, dreams are very interesting, and I think as I got older, my subconscious really likes to be tricky with me. I mean, I don't know what it is that I eat or drink or whatever, but there's been some very vivid and just overall strange just experiences with dreams. That there's like so many different species of dreams, it seems like. I miss having the really stupid ones when I was younger, the ones that had no context, just random, like it's me shaking hands with Richard Nixon and then turn around and there's like my dog scooting his ass on the grass. I miss those dreams. And then I don't know what it is. I flipped a switch somewhere in my brain, man, but man, nightmares are dark. And the things that aren't nightmares are just strictly and extremely bizarre. See, what's interesting to me is when you start having dreams where your senses are still active like they would be as if you're awake. Like you can taste, smell, and touch and feel stuff. That to me is intriguing. And I think it's unexplainable, really, to some people. There's obviously a scientific explanation, right? You know, but I'm just saying, when you're caught off guard by those things, man, I mean, whoa. And I like it. I say this sarcastically. I just love the fact that my subconscious can't get over certain things that I'm over, but yet subconsciously, apparently, in my dream world, I'm not. I'm sure many people have dreams about people for some reason over and over and over again. And just all it does is just, it can fucking ruin your day. Certain situations you just dream about. It's like, why is this happening? All that shit. Yeah, so it's like the subconscious realm is probably the most complex and probably the deepest and most important thing. But yet we barely can understand it, you know. We have to remember that the subconscious part of our brain is responsible for our breathing and our heartbeat. It's just there. It's in the code. So life is but a dream, I guess, in that context. So, you know, the dream thing. And then, so essentially, you know, as you get older, it's not a bad idea to change your diet or consider stuff. There are some people I've seen in my life that can do anything. I mean, any goddamn thing, and just doesn't fuck with them. Never does. Doesn't bother him. Shakes it off like a trooper, like a soldier, if you will. And I envy that, and I respect that. That's good genetics. That's strong genetics. That's fucking remarkable immune system, genetics, the psychology, everything. And one thing I definitely don't want to do is try to, like, provide a solution. And because a lot of people will tell you, well, all you got to do is just, why don't you meditate, man? And I've heard that several times over the course of my life. I've tried. I really have tried, and I simply cannot, and I don't think I ever would be able to unless there's some sort of chemical assistance there. It's just not possible for me and many others. So the meditation thing's out the window, but I do recommend other people to give it a shot, because it might actually, you might be able to pull that off. Yeah, those kind of suggestions. And we know that there's limitations and danger involved with the medication involved for sleep. So we have to, and relaxation and sedation. In the human experience, as you get older, you got to figure out what the ratio is of stimulus and sedation. And then moderation, which to me, having my dad's genetics, it's just seemingly, again, like meditation. Meditation and moderation are two things I cannot really do very well. So the best course of action, really, for a lot of people, including myself, is to stay out of certain situations that would provoke or inspire you to act against moderation and meditation or whatever, sedation. So, it's a thing. But yeah, much like fighting sleep, when you're going against something your body's telling you that you have to do, it's just by default that is always going to be bad. So these are things that every human being deals with, every one of us. It's something to consider. And then all these newer and external things, these elaborate external technologies and stuff around us, and gizmos, gadgets, lights, and sounds and stuff like that, does slowly but surely affect us, every aspect of us. So the nature dreams, the golden times of sleep, and how we get there and how do we achieve that is dependent on the individual. And there's always many options to approach it and to indulge. But we don't know unless you try, I think anyone who considers himself to be creative or has creative hobbies of any sort, just by default don't sleep well. You just don't. Like me right now, it's early in the morning, and I'm like, I got to say some stuff into my phone. That's the mind. That's it's an abnormal psychology that's at play when it comes to people that have delved in any kind of hobby or art form or whatever it is. Like, it can consume you. For me, it was music, and then as I got older, it was other stuff that I just find to be interesting. I really envy hand-drawn stuff. Most things that I've been very interested in, I can make a strong effort into being satisfied in getting into it, but I can't draw. I mean, I really wish I could. And I knew people that were so good at that stuff when I was growing up. And when I was a kid, I wanted to make comic books. It's interesting. I used to collect comic books because they had value when I was a kid, but I was more just blown away by the aesthetic of it. At that age, you were lucky. If I was reading anything, it was like the back of the cereal box or instruction manual to a Nintendo game or whatever the case may be. I envied the artists, those people that can take a piece of paper and just simple, a lead pencil and a piece of paper and just fucking create something unique or even recreate something. That's one thing I can't do. I can make really goofy, cartoony looking things, but I can never do anything pseudo-realistic like in the Marvel or DC comics, and that was something I always wanted to do. In a perfect world, though, at this point in my creative life, I wish I could have been Stan Lee. I wanted to be the guy. I want to be in the house of ideas where I can come up with stories and just these suggestions here and there of, like, what a visual story could look like. Because in essence, comic books are cinematic anyway. They're just very well done storyboards that matured and evolved through thousands of years, basically. Yeah, at least hundreds of years just a character drawn with a bubble. It's been done for a long time. So it was tailor-made for film. That's why there's been some really good comic book films, and then of course there's the boring, tiresome, and even just awful ones. But that's just Hollywood, though. I'm a big fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and believe me, there's probably more awful films made than great ones. And sometimes you're just going to have to learn how to settle for in between all that, because that's what you're going to get. Mostly. God damn, there's some bad movies, y'all. I don't expect you to find the time to binge watch. I'm not referring to the new stuff and the new Mystery Science Theater. It's okay, but go back and take a look at that stuff. But yeah, there's some... It's hard. I think it's the point I'm trying to make. Like electronic music, anyone could really make that right now. Anyone can do that. But making good electronic music, great stuff that people would even go out to listen to you mix or download, requires work. The same thing with rap music. A lot of people can easily be somewhat of a rapper and put out about 4 or 5 songs in an EP or whatever. But again, being a great one, being something above average, still requires work, no matter how effortless the production side of it is. Just always remember that, because it's very easy to get judgmental and just be like, that's all sounds like garbage. And there is a lot of garbage out there. There's way more garbage now that we can look at because of the markets are flooded everywhere, and we can see it just, and hear it more. It's, before it required a lot of work, a lot more work, like getting a tape or a CD and copying the shit out of it, throwing it out, playing shows and all that stuff. Now it's very simplified, but it does weed out, and eventually it just weeds out the weaker, I guess. But at the same time, in the process of that, the consumer is burnt the fuck out, and I understand that. I used to not understand. I used to get angry, but I get it. I totally get it. Like, people are bombarded between all the fucking television shows and all the talent shows and stuff like that. The American Idols, The Voice, America's Got Talent, all that stuff. Britain's Got Talent. If you got satellite, you can see that shit. It's there was that on top of the pop music machine, which I still don't understand it sometimes, but it's there. But even it's easy to manufacture a pop star, but there's actually still some, I think, personally, some that were really good, that had legit talent. And you want to talk about isolating your musicians friends, is bring that shit up. It's just a fact of life. We can sit there and shit on pop music all we want to, but most of us were kids that we listened to what was on the fucking radio. And then some parents, had a decent record collection and all that stuff. So, but we outgrow things, and that's important. Growing up and being able to accept and learn and move on is very important stuff. But art and sciences and all that stuff, these are coping mechanisms, basically, that are in the pursuit of solving problems. And from an artistic point of view, generally, it is a self-analysis, and it's a problem that pertains to the singer or the composer in question. It at the end of the day, is about solving some sort of problem. The comedians are the ones that have been taken up. Like, I really appreciate those guys. The legends out there that have really taken the art form, the craft, if you will, is about as far as you possibly can, really. Both hilarious, both informative and philosophical. Johnny Carson, of course, I think he said that the plague of a comedian is becoming a philosopher, and I disagree with that. I think it works with some people. It depends on how you do it and what you sandwich your philosophies in with, But eventually comedians get tired of shtick, and they just got things on their mind, and they go with it. And it's not always the most crowd-pleasing scenario, but I respect it. It's like a musician who gets tired of singing about love. The Beatles got tired of singing about love for a while, and they still created Sgt. Pepper, and and they went into other things, other realms. You know, the White Album. You know, they explored darker stuff, and they still pulled it off because they're fucking amazing. But that doesn't mean that you or anyone else shouldn't give up, because there's just a period of time where you're on it. It might not be the most polished, but you're on it. And then that's the moments you have to focus on, is being on top of shit. And it's hard to be on top of shit when you get older and you're fatigued and you're tired. And it's easy to get burnt out, and your patience just starts to fly out the fucking window and back into the ether. I think my problem is if I put just as much effort and enthusiasm that I have for stuff that doesn't pay any money, I would probably have money and success, or whatever that means. And of course, success is relative to your perception. What to some people, that are old and their bones don't work, just, being able to sit down and get up quick enough is like a fucking feat. It's success. That's success. And when people say it's the small things in life, it is the small things. Inherently, we're all detailist, and we always remember the small. Sometimes we remember the subtle stuff, but there's going to be a time where it's like, oh my God, I didn't catch that. That wasn't crazy. I didn't notice that. That to me is the essence of like a true fucking human, a true artist, a true fucking whatever, is the small things and continuity, being able to keep a consistency. Again, that's hard, because information will come to light and change the foundation of everything that you had previously believed in. And that's something we have to work on as a species, period. Will that happen in our lifetime? Who knows? Who the fuck knows? All I know is it's interesting that a phrase, follow your dreams. And earlier in this podcast, I was talking about how fucking outrageous dreams are. And maybe, what if we did? What if we had some sort of ability to follow in our dreams and just kind of the nonsensical crap to find like a nugget of something important that you can use in this reality? Maybe that's it. That's why there's people that try to interpret dreams and try to break them down, even though some of them are pretty good at it. Some of them are just like, are you kidding me, man? That doesn't make any sense. Your dream about the mountain lion ordering ice cream from Dairy Queen is representing your fear of nature and the fact that maybe you're lactose intolerant. There's that. Dreams. It does imply that you have to be knocked the fuck out, at least good enough to have some REM sleep. It's typically when you rapid eye movement sleep, where you can remember your dreams. Most people don't remember that. I wonder if I had the ability. That's a superpower. It's me, dream guy. I'm able to remember the dreams that I wasn't supposed to remember, or I can remember the dreams you forgot about. You want to talk about an interesting guy to have at parties, but that's about as far as it goes. You don't want to take that guy at your kid's graduation or whatever, but still, I don't know how many dreams. It's like the spiders that you supposedly swallow. That's a superhero power too. Another one. Like Dream Guy's arch nemesis is the spider retriever. No, it's not a hybrid of a Spider-Man and a golden retriever. It's a guy who pulls spiders that you swallowed out and puts it on a piece of paper and says, "There, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh my gosh!" Rob Davis came up with one. He was a while back. I don't even know if he remembers this, but he was talking about how a crappy superpower would be just to grow your hair out. That your hair just grows. It just being able to get almost all the lotto numbers correct. The approximate lotto winner guy, or nearly won the lotto guy. I like to see that on the big screen. He's always one off. And then, at the end of the movie, he gets it right, but, like a piano drops on them or something at the end, kind of out of a Warner Brothers cartoon. It's over. Somebody can remove their kneecaps at will. By day, he's a mild-mannered mailman. By night, he takes his kneecaps off and throws them at people. They're retractable, though. It's kind of like Captain America's shield. It'll come back, you know. Again, these are shitty superpowers and people that you probably would invite in parties. You can only take in small doses. Like Hamster Man. Hamster Man, he just kind of just gets real fat, and he gets on the wheel, and it has a giant water bottle thing, and he's just really weird, and no one hangs out with him, and that's his plight. That's the base of the story. Have you seen Henry, the hamster boy? I mean, he doesn't physically look like a hamster. He's just really overweight and just adopts hamster-like fucking mannerisms and stuff. So that there's that. How about a guy who can only lift 30 pounds? Mr. Deadlift, or Diet Deadlift. Although he physically should be able to pick up more, but he can't go past 30 pounds. Can't deadlift it, so don't get him stocking your shelves at Walmart. How about guy who can pick up weird TV channels from France, or Captain Ringworm, or oh man, I'll end up doing this forever, so I have to stop. But yeah, there's that. Okay, I'm going to make a special effort here to clarify some stuff on why I'm so adamantly against pretty much all political yammering and arguments and posturing and conjecture and all that stuff has been going on, especially intensified in the last 2 years. One of the things you have to understand about politics as an adult. Now, first of all, I'm not registered to any party, you know, and if it ever got to that point where I had to check something off the box, you know, maybe a libertarian, maybe, or something off the wall, I truly believe that there's enough evidence in the 200 or so year history of this country that both ideologies are failures, but there's also enough evidence that supports that they can coexist. I guess you can say when I was younger, I was more left-leaning because of the Bush era post 9/11 stuff that was happening, and then in the process of what was going on then, the economy, and then there was this drug culture that was starting to spew up, and it was just a nasty time. And that was my naivety was invested in that. Oh, you just have to vote for the other side. I mean, come on, that's what's going to solve everyone's problems. And you know, Gore won that election and all that stuff. People forget about that really crazy election between them two, and the hanging chads there in Florida, and how was it Bush's brother Jeb helped to curb all that kind of suspicion. But anyway, provably, both parties are as corrupt as anything else. And the reason why I always constantly use the analogy with pro wrestling is simple. For those who are completely unfamiliar on how the fucking thing works, basically you get a guy that everyone likes and says the right things and does the right things, and he's the baby face. That's what they call him. That's for the people. That's your hero of your story, of the arc, the story. Then you have the guy who's the antithesis to everything that baby face stands for, and it gets you so angry and so mad that you want to pick up stuff and throw stuff at them, spit at them. Now I'm speaking, of course, in a traditional wrestling sense. Nowadays it is obviously completely different. It's a whole different conversation together. But at the end of the day, after everyone gets their cheering and booing and spitting and anger and all that out of their system, both men go and they collect their money. And then before they get their money, there's a man, or like in TNA's case, a woman, who also gets a large chunk of that fucking cash. This is exactly how politics, especially, is working in the 21st century. It's much more divisive now. And much like Stone Cold Steve Austin or other pro wrestlers that have taken the ball in their own court and made their own business against the grain of whatever the people were saying, that's Trump. Trump, basically, there's no way in hell any of us can really know who the man really is. Is he a racist? Is he a xenophobe or whatever? All I know is he's part of that baby boomer generation. He made his money. Of course, he had money inherited to him and all that stuff too, but he knew how to keep that money train going. He did the reality TV show. And I don't know why people were so shocked that someone from a TV show or reality show made it that far into the politics. I mean, I guarantee you, if any of these Kardashian sluts got out there and decided that they was going to run, you know, we would all say the same thing. There's no way in hell that would ever happen. And then, bam, what do we know, apparently? So, I'm not going to fucking jump and bite at every little headline that is being spewed out about Trump and his supporters. It just doesn't fly with me. And the thing is, it's like, it's kind of hard because you got to understand how difficult it is, especially with my fellow musicians and all that stuff. I think all of them are fairly left-leaning, at least. But then I realized I got older, and it's just, I just realized that like every president since that I've been alive has just been just a train of bullshit. They can run on any really, you know, a campaign where it's over. It works for everybody, and a real crowd pleasing. Things people want to hear. It should be obvious. It's the cliche, you know, and it never happens because once they get in the office, it's not a dictatorship. I mean, they can have executive orders and whatnot, but they still got a Senate and Congress and all this stuff they answer to. So anytime someone says, you know, we're going to build a wall or we're going to give everyone, you know, health care and all this stuff, you have to realize that it takes more than just saying it. It's just an idea. People get excited. Anyone can have that idea. So you also have to understand, anytime a candidate gets that fucking far, anyone in any political ladder, you gotta understand the type of person that you have to be to get into that position. And I mean, imagine just being mayor one day and then having ambitions, and you're like, I'm just going to be the state senator, and then from there I'm going to be the president. The level of commitment and the level of shit that you're going to have to eat in order to get to that point is outrageous. So it goes without saying that you almost have to be a fucking complete psychopath or sociopath, both, to get to that point. So by the time you're at that point, you're over it. So you are basically, in America, the president is just the face. It's the Hulk Hogan, the Rock, the Ronald McDonald of the country. And, you know, people just get pissed when certain, you know, that they think that, you know, no one person really could ever represent a country. That's just outrageous, and it shouldn't be portrayed that way, and it shouldn't be interpreted in that manner, but it is. So more or less what I'm saying is, obviously politics are bullshit, but I know why people get into it. Just like religion, there's things about religion I don't understand and I question, but I understand why they're into it. Also, it's the same thing when it comes to politics and swinging for either side, or, you know, whatever. It's a release. I think people are filtering their disappointment in whether it's becoming an adult, having children, being married, the job, or whatever, into politics, because there's always going to be common things that will never change no matter what. And that's why I've always said that the real thing that dictates society's behavior, and what's been dictating society's behavior for the last 25 years, has been technology. There's no fucking doubt about that. And political parties, and at least the ideologies of conservatism and democracy, are about behavior changes. That's the reason why that's why people make links to communism and socialism with the Democrats, and even there's the Nazi conservatism too, because that existed. I'm not saying I would say that it's pretty much been dying out. But the last thing any political candidate, whether you're Republican or Democrat, needs is some fucking racist that says I'm behind this. And I look at it also fans of bands too. Like, my favorite band of all time is the Beatles. Anyone who knows me knows it's the Beatles. But I've met people that have the same enthusiasm for the Beatles as I do. And although there's that common fucking talking point, are just people are horrible. I just don't want to. We don't click on anything. Blah blah blah. You're going to have shitty people, toxic people on anytime there's a gathering. It's just a fact of life. And some of them are vocal minorities, and not minorities in fucking not African Americans and Hispanics, but a small group of people that are very vocal and are very active. And that's where you get into the social justice warrior thing. Just the social justice warrior. The warrior part of it I do find to be interesting, because most of these people are pacifists and anti-gun and all that stuff. And that's where then that gets into Antifa. And then that became militant somehow, like the gun training and all that stuff. It's just weird. And like that guy that was a Democrat, that was a never Trumper or whatever, that was shooting up at the baseball game for the White House in Pennsylvania. I thought that was very interesting. So the thing is people have to understand, that it is a game, and most certainly it's a game. Again, like I said in the last podcast, it's about participation. So if people are looking at politics to solve your problems, you've got another problem. It takes the people, all this stuff. There's a lot of things these candidates and their counterparts will promise till the cows come home, but you should know by now that no matter who it is, no matter how charismatic they are, it's a snowball chance in hell that from proclamation to actual action is going to occur. And it doesn't even matter. Like, you have the political theater, much like professional wrestling, and standard hero villain story arcs that are featured in everything. It's just entertainment. It's just a large, well done distraction from who you are and your communities, or lack thereof, and shit that happens with the planet. Or strange things. I just find it interesting, like these volcanoes that have been going off basically for the last 4 or 5 years now. I haven't seen one scientist being out like, oh yeah, we were wrong about that being not being active for another 100,000 years or whatever the crap. No one's owning up to that shit. There's things too, like when there's like these illnesses and stuff that happen, unless it's the bird flu. And then all this any kind of animal flu happens, and they're like, "Hey, go out there, get your shot. If you don't, you're whatever, a disloyal piece of shit. You're a weirdo." That's another thing we have to stop doing. We have to stop throwing terms around that are pretty derogatory towards people that are trying to come up with critical thinking about something, because a lot of things are crazy. Yeah, it's on a baseline level. Once you even deconstruct to the third step of anything, a lot of shit is batshit crazy. It really is. And I guess at best, when someone comes up with an alternative idea to something, it might seem like, because it's so foreign and you're not used to even thinking about it, your immediate reaction is to be like, fuck that guy, don't listen to that guy, he's crazy. And it's interesting, in the last, like, 10 years, a lot of people that we thought were pretty fucking crazy have been, like, validated. Like Randy Quaid. And then before that, Dave Chappelle. You know, Dave Chappelle, he talks about it in his latest... I highly recommend everyone to check out Bird Revelation. It's the one of the 2 specials he put out New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day, or 2017 and 2018. Check that out. Plenty of people have been vilified and validated through, you know, and we once thought they were fucking crazy. I mean, you know, and that's the thing. And it's interesting because it's like how religious people used to think that if you had a seizure that you were being, you know, possessed by the devil and all that stuff. Okay, all right, now they're crazy. You know, eventually they got proven to be crazy, and there's people that proves, you know, it just goes, it wavers. So we have to be a little bit careful about how quickly we throw people into boxes and ship them away and say they're nuts. There's no way in hell that... and then it happens, and you know what the general reaction is? Anytime something does get proved that the crazy person said, it's a lot of silence. And then that's when the distractions come back in. Okay, let's bitch about Trump again, or let's find some email, or Hillary looks fat. Let's talk about Hillary being a fat person, all that stuff. It's brilliant. So sometimes the crazy motherfucker, everything that you participate in right now, right down to your work schedule of 9 to 5, and this phone and the phone you're using and all this stuff was manufactured and made up by people that were otherwise considered crazy. And people that were supposedly just loafers and leechers because they had too much time on their hands. You know, that's another empty fucking complaint. I'm sorry. You're just jealous if someone has too much time on their hands. Why don't you do something? Why? Well, do you want me to be in your way or not? You know. So you have to be really careful with your judgments in the way we treat people who's, you know. Because it's a huge risk to come out and just be like, hey, you know, like any kind of whistleblower or anybody, it's, you know, I guess otherwise be looked at as tattletales. But when it comes to people's lives and serious shit, we can't keep throwing these motherfuckers under the bus. We can't keep taking them away from their finances and stuff like that. Don't be so fucking hasty and quick. I know technology has gave us this quick access to information. It's kind of spoiled us in real life when it comes to the real life situations. But come on, y'all. Let's slow down a bit. Now, I was quite outspoken about the Roseanne situation, and, you know, I saw a picture of Valerie Jarrett. I Googled it later, and honestly, she didn't seem like... I wouldn't know that she is half, you know, black or whatever, because she didn't sincerely look like a black woman to me. So, and that's all I will say about that. And I do think Roseanne was under attack because ABC didn't want that show, just like they didn't want Tim Allen's show. Regardless if you're conservative or liberal or not, that's not fucking fair. And again, I tie that to a lot of payback that the conservatives did to the liberals during the Vietnam thing. The war hawks were hardcore on the anti-war people and the hippies or whatever. But so now I don't know what kind of logic says that 2 wrongs are making a right here, because it don't. It's just childish horse shit. And it's killing the entertainment business. Let's be honest. The blatant political preaching and hardcore zero tolerance for this sounds a whole lot like fucking Germany, you know, East Germany, whatever, fucking Hitler, you know, the 1940s Germany. What the fuck is wrong with people here? And it's, yeah, people are tuning out. Star Wars, prime example. The actual Marvel comics themselves, the actual, believe it or not, printed and colored comic books are also going down the shitter because of blatant social justice warrior. What is the word I'm looking for? It's just really militant, and it's going about it the wrong way, because what happens is it'd be different if the stories and stuff were good, but they're not. So since they're really poorly done, stories and people critique them, the first thing people say is you're just being a male chauvinist, you're being a racist, and you're being transphobic, or whatever word you want to come up with. And this thing kind of started with Obama. Obama, honest to God, I truly believe is one of the smoothest talking, best looking presidents we've had in a long time. But I don't agree with this shit. He's just another dude. He's just another president, just black, white, yellow, beige, flip-flop color or whatever, that just was there and he was gone, to me. For 8 years, it just didn't, no. So the problem is when you critique anything he does or whatever, people are like, well, you're just being racist. That's it. That's simple. It's simple for me to just call you racist because I don't want to fucking argue. And I understand that. It's so much easier to say, oh, I get it. You're racist. Oh, so you support conservatism or Trump for that matter. Oh, okay, you're a racist. I get it. You're a racist. And then the conservatives fire back at the liberals, calling them crazy people, lunatics and stuff. And guess what? Nothing gets done. All this does is create more fights, more division, more soft spots, and it's just made it even more incredibly awkward for people to exist and hang out with other people in real life. Now, real life was that thing that we used to do that was really fun. It was. It was fun for a while. And, of course, in the eyes of a child, it seems like you're looking at a lifetime of it's never going to stop. It's the sugar rush that will keep going till the end of time. But, yeah, real life. Now, real life's the life, this is the one you actually get to experience, from as far as I know. And like I said, it used to be really good. And it still is, but it's different now. You have to get used to, one of the biggest pieces of advice I could ever give anybody is like, you have to learn to be by yourself. And I know that sounds really sad and pathetic even, but you have to. You have no chance of surviving this life, the real one, if you can't be by yourself. And look, man, I'm not saying forever. You have to confront yourself first. I really think so. That's the battle. Understanding why you feel a certain way about things. Like, why do I get angry at this? Why does this make me happy? Now, you don't want to make the mistake that I made sometimes and just deconstruct things to the point where I'm like, hey, I don't like anything. You start looking at human biology and stuff at this point. But that's what time does. Maybe in those cases, in that particular case, too much time can be a bad thing. Some people aren't built for that. I understand that. But there's a lot of us that are. But real life is something you can experience by yourself. It's a fuck ton more funner with a group, with a witness or two. What good is a comedian if all the thing he does is just makes himself laugh to the point of, whatever, And then in the older days, they would have called that man a lunatic, of course. But the real life thing, one of the things that I think is spectacular about real life is like the weather, nature. How nature fucking does its thing to me is epic. I know that's a word that probably should be banned from the internet because it's been used so much, but nature don't play. Mother Nature is a beast, especially on this planet. There's people that have studied other planets and can tell you every nook and cranny of it, but yet we haven't, as far as I know, no one's been open about touching the bottom of the ocean. We don't know. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion of, yeah. So real life, you get to the experience nature, and experience in nature is just spectacular. I mean, you look at things like tornadoes and earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides, lightning storms, snowstorms, sky phenomena of all sorts, and then you look at right down to the microcosm, to the insects. Everything on this planet is really pretty fucking bizarre, and B, brutal. So it's like nature is kind of like an avant-garde death metal band, if I had to put it in a comparison, because it is fucking crazy. Like, I just recently found out that one of the loudest insects in the world is a water bug that is the size of maybe a pea, but he makes its sound is the equivalent, because it wants to be heard underwater. It's a mating call, and ideally, and get this, it's with its dick. Its fucking tiny bug dick generates this noise that can be heard deep in the river. And I thought that was the funniest shit I've heard in a long time. And one of these days, I might turn that into a bit. I've sending it to people on Facebook Messengers, like, hey, I know you got some other stuff going on, but look at this. There's a bird that farts in wormholes to scare the worms out so it could eat it. And it's the Bayesian thrush. I think it's pronounced Bayesian thrush is the farting bird that farts in the general direction of a worm to hunt it. Google it. I'm sure you'll find something, but that's bizarre. You look at ants. Ants are fucking bizarre. The various species of ants. So after observing how fucking strange nature is around us, unaltered really by just by the stuff we've done, and it's no surprise that humans is fucked up, but I think the human species is the most fucked up, bizarre, and brutal species on this planet. Absolutely. And the brutality side of nature, I think, is actually essential for survival, obviously. But what we've done, an interesting twist, is we became more or less our own fucking enemy, our own worst enemy, which I find that to be interesting. It is very interesting, the more you look at it. I guess, back to deconstruction, when you deconstruct stuff, you really take a look at it really is bizarre. And for some people, they have to take, a certain hallucinogenic, and they can sit, to their own devices and kind of come up with that on their own. But I think everybody eventually, if they got time, this is again back to this time issue, and you just take a look at anything, just any household items, the furniture in your house, the toilet, and then you're just like, wow, you're just kind of blown away by it. It's because it's ingenious, and it's also just painfully weird how it got to that point, So yeah, I understand why people get excited about certain things. I like stuff that isn't real, like video games and maybe a few films and movies and books or whatever, graphic novels, comics. Love that shit. Wrestling, some wrestlers, shit that I know provably, obviously, is wrong or fake, not real. Might have tinges of reality, but it's not real. I mean, I know that. I know how movies are made. Sometimes, to a certain extent, knowing how some movies are made, and the more you know, the less you like them. Like, that's what happened with me in Star Wars here recently, is because it's just the whole political nonsense and the dickery that goes on. But yeah, and it's okay to be critical. You just got to do it more carefully. You got to come at certain situations with a lot of information, but you also have to take that information and reinterpret it so where it can be clearly understood, and no one can come up with assumptions or whatever, hidden meanings and all that shit. So you got to be careful with that, obviously. Oh, actually, I should have mentioned this earlier, but for the people that have been listening to my podcast, I thank you so much, and I do. I will kind of spam this in Messenger and stuff like that because I don't have my Facebook profile active. And I know Casey does some stuff, but I actually feel like the stuff that I talk about is beneficial. And I think it's not just a bunch of narcissistic horse shit, where you listen to me beating off in my bedroom. I feel like it's a gap. I'm trying to fill a gap because we're having less conversation now as a whole. And I feel like that's why podcasting in general is so popular and so well received, is because it's filling these gaps of lack of true conversations like we had when we used to have real life. Back to the real life situation. Real life is it's the one and only one, and we kind of take it for granted, obviously. And a lot of people just don't get it, and that's fine. If you don't get it, just stay out of the way, I guess, would be the best advice I can give. Don't try to outdo yourself on certain things that you're not qualified for. And I guess that's kind of hypocritical for me because I have no qualifications to tell you shit. It's just thoughts and ideas, and it's clay. You can mold them into whatever the fuck you want. It can be a statue of failed ideas that might be more interesting than the ideas they were made from. Who knows? Also on this oh shit list you need to put on there, there's some otherwise thought to be dormant volcanoes that are becoming active, and there's a lot of seismic activity, and there's cracks appearing on Earth. Now, with that being said, that does not mean you're going to open up your door in the next few days and all of a sudden there's a river of lava coming at you. No, but what that you do need to understand is there is some shit changing on our planet. And it goes beyond the carbon footprint narrative of what humans do. If it is of human doing, it might have something to do with fracking, but I don't know how much. This might have something to do with the solar bodies and our planetary system. I think that's significant, and it should be, again, topic number one. There, but then again, the main reason why it's not, just like a lot of things in this world or in your state or whatever, is not a matter of discussion, is because of panic. They do understand that on a general basis, people are very unbalanced and just not steady enough to handle basic shit. And when you introduce the concept of there's some things going on with the Earth we are not sure of, and we're not scientific, with the scientists are trying to come up with an explanation, and generally they don't want to touch it. They'll touch base with it maybe just for a few minutes, just to fill time up, and then go on to whatever nonsense, because it is nonsense, guys. Y'all know this. Y'all should know this, but a lot of you don't, and I'm not judging you for it. I want you to consider the fact that there is some serious shit. And I found it interesting that they use the human carbon footprint narrative as we're destroying the Earth because there's too many of us, and we're just leaving these large carbon footprints are dangerous. When a fucking volcano shoots out CO2 like nobody's business, and at one point in 2012, four of these volcanoes went off at the same time. You can just Google 4 volcanoes simultaneously. It happened. And that's scary shit. That's a lot of CO2. And what happens there immediately is it creates its own ecosystem, more or less, as it approaches the air and all that stuff. And that can cause a lot of, roadblocks for meteorology, all kinds of stuff for the ecology. It affects, I think when these animals are washing up, these sea life washing up on shore, is because of red tide that's being provoked by underwater in ocean volcanoes. People forget that there's volcanoes in the ocean. The seismic activity, the Earth's core, is active and has been very active for a while, and I do believe we're facing something very epic soon, and it's something that everyone needs to consider. Now, you have to remember, in 2010, when the fucking Gulf Stream basically died because BP, and killed, there's deep ocean coral reefs that are still active as far as I know, but it stopped the flow of that. And the Gulf Stream's responsible for the United States spring weather and summer weather, thermonuclear activities, what they call it. I've said this shit before, but apparently it doesn't hit home, and apparently it was forgotten about because that's the kind of world we live in. There's so much stuff that happens so quickly, so much of it we tend to forget. So there is something I do believe that we can take some relief in, that it isn't our fault necessarily, because the Earth has put up with things far worse than us over the millions of years, even if that's correct, that it's been around. So I do find that disturbing, and I do find that alarming that it's not a talking point. Again, this whole feel-good news thing has been detrimental and it's bullshit. And of course, if people by now should realize that this is a reality, just turn off the fucking television. Turn off that, all of it. You know, there might be some good journalists out there and anchors that are trying their best, but trust me, they're outnumbered. Just like there's good politicians and there's all this, outnumbered. There's strength in numbers. And the corporate nature involved in television and the businesses and all that stuff is far more complex than what we realize, and there's so much more money in there than what we realize. So yes, it's time that we start focusing on this stuff and start understanding, because I think that might actually help us pull our shit together. Or maybe it doesn't help pull our shit together. Maybe it just incites the worst panic that humanity has experienced ever. But hey, it is what it is. Now, those of you listening to this, I just might have gave you another reason to drink, and I'm sorry, but that's fine. You know, hey, it's you. You do you the best you can, as long as you don't hurt anyone else and force your will upon anyone else. How about that? How about that simple concept of letting people be? I don't have to agree with how people do any of that shit. I don't. There's a lot of shit I personally just find disgusting. Especially with the drug culture, but hey, as long as they're not fucking with anyone's innocence and not fucking with anyone else's business, people shouldn't just wake up out of a cold, in a cold sweat out of a deep sleep. Oh, people are saying dirty things to each other, or oh my god, there's so many people doing stuff I don't understand, and I get it as far as content-wise to think about from a sociology standpoint as to why these things are occurring. But it's not the end of your world. You still have your world, especially the parents out there and the people that are supporting others, that are going the extra mile to help and back and forth, whatever the case may be. Those judgments need to be reserved for other things. There's bigger, more complex shit out there that is dangerous and detrimental to our way of life. And again, like I said, there's a lot of things that are amazing that are happening, but it's a high-low culture. There's a lot of this stuff that's really doing well, and then there's stuff in the process of that becoming, you know, as high as it is very low. We're in extremes. There's no middle ground. There's no middle class, really. And that's what's happening, man. And this is something I came up with my own brain and through my own life experience. For a lot of people, they're like, Alan has life experience? Are you kidding me? Yeah, a little bit, enough. You know, I'm observant. I listen to people's stories. I listen to people's shit. I take it very seriously. I think it's, you know, there's some stuff I won't take seriously, but there's things, it's information, man. Information is the commodity of all commodities. I've processed and reprocessed, and I've looked at it and dealt with my own stuff and compared and contrasted and all this stuff. And I got to tell you, there is some shit that is, that we don't even have a word for, that is coming down the road. And I guess that is alarmist, but it's something that some people in the right positions could do something about. Now, this is, again, you know, one of the common themes with my podcast is tall fucking orders and unrealistic expectations. But I think at some point, someone is going to wake up and say, fuck it. I'm sick of this shit. I'm actually legitimately worried, despite the money I've made and all the hard work and goals I've achieved. I'm putting myself away from it and I'm going to help. It might happen. I don't know when it will happen. We might be long gone, y'all, before it happens. But I have to tell you, there is criminal, sociopathic, psychopathic people that are very persistent, very organized, and they are backed up with enough money that they are going to do what they want to do, because that persistence is definitely the most important part of that, because they're never going to give it up. They're never going to give it up. It's going to, and some people say that, oh, well, that's, like the racist and stuff in the conservative movement and all that stuff. Yeah, you know what? I think I've seen it, but I got to tell you, a lot of them people are dying off, quite frankly. And those values, they might have attempted to pass those shitty values down, but I don't think in a rational world that's happening. But then again, is this world rational? Again, there's strength in numbers. I think, like I said before, I think a very poorly educated and aggressive people breed more than anybody else. And that should alert you to some sort of fallacy or some sort of loophole in this human thing. Because you got to think about what got us here. Anyway, we're basically this beast offshoot, side project that survived some chaotic Earth events, like I was mentioning earlier, that could be happening. And these aggressive psychopaths survived, really. And we're basically the byproduct of that. We just got civilized over the years. Because, thank God, there's been some good fucking parents and good, strong authority figures that have inspired us to fucking empathy. Is the question that a lot of people may ask, is empathy a negative? Is empathy, being an empath and sympathetic, is it actually a drawback, a weakness? I personally think not. But there's some aggressively, with whether it's testosterone or not, that do see that as a weakness and will not provide any kind of indication of empathy and sympathy. And I think a lot of that also has genetic properties, obviously. And there's pharmaceutical interventions involved in that has happened, provably. Not all of them, but some of them, enough of them. Like the Anthony Bourdain was a Chantix user. Google that. I mentioned Chantix before with people when it comes to the pharma arguments. And a lot of people smoke. It's the reason why it's a common thing. When my dad quit smoking, they put him on Wellbutrin. That didn't work out well for him, and he just stopped. He's like, fuck it, I'd just rather smoke. I think Anthony Bourdain had said in a Mark Maron podcast, which they've re-uploaded twice and they edited it out, but I've heard the clip, and you can find it, where he talks about how Chantix worked for him, but it does come with a little bit of weirdness to it. It does fuck with you. And I think the main agitation that comes from when you quit smoking, as somebody, I did quit for like 3.5 years. You're just going to have built-in agitation just because you're not doing the thing you like anymore. And that's just it's just a gradual thing you have to work on, like every other addiction. You have the physical side effects of withdrawal, and then you have the psychological things, and you have to change, you have to substitute. It's actually, really, everything is vice substitution. Write it down. Vice substitution. Because you can't really, honest to God, and I'm sure there is probably some form of lobotomy or chemical bombardment that would eliminate all the need to enjoy yourself, and your reward system is rewired. Like, I don't know why, but I used to smoke, but now I just like to break glass. I mean, I just go out there and just break glass against the trees. It sounds really good, and that's what gets me through the hump. I don't know why. It's strange. So there's so much augmentation that goes on to our basic human nature over the thousands of years of whatever evolution that I think has caught up with us on certain levels. So that's it's a confusing but deep issue, but it's something for y'all to think about. Through the more extreme times in our evolution, if we're going to go with that, there was a period of adaptation. Then there was a period of augmentation, like, all right, now what? And then there was the Industrial Revolution, which I think was, compared to the other things, is the most recent thing, and that changed. People had big families in turn of the century and before because of farm work. You had to have an army in order to eat and to make a living of some sort, and some people still, despite doing what they're supposed to do, they still didn't do well because of other factors that they had no control over. So we're coming up on another augmentation phase that does involve our technology. And like I said before, I think people are underestimating the speed in which these things are happening. Now, I will say with the robotics thing, there's still obviously some hangups. They're going to have to get worked through. And all it takes is just somebody with the right amount of zeros on the check. We can get that shit done. And I think it was the second podcast of the first one where I mentioned automation and universal basic income. These things do sound kind of crackpotish, but it's a possibility that at some point that will be our lives, our children's lives, and then our grandchildren's lives. The club, I titled this podcast The Intellectual Fight Club because actually I do believe that such a thing actually exists. Yeah, there's still a lot of glad handing and handshakes and jerking each other off and trophies and aprons and rings and t-shirts and all that stuff. But a lot of it has to do with just information, important stuff. Whether it's for the good of mankind or for that fucking area or for the worst. Corruptible. Everything is corruptible in our lives. It really is. And there were times where it wasn't as corruptible, or we weren't able to see it often or to notice it because of the rate of information was different at different points, obviously. But like Dave Chappelle had said in Bird Revelation, which, again, watch that motherfucking stand-up. The most uncomfortable person in the room, he says, is the person who's right. And then he followed it up with, I was right at an orgy once and nobody wanted to fuck me. I love that line so much because it does, even though he put some abstracts in there to make it generally funny, but yes, the truth is a turnoff. Honest people are turnoff. So here's what I gotta say, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please just fuck the hell out of the honest people? And I'm just saying that just as some sort of a fucking hidden agenda that I'm trying to put myself out there. These honest, strong people, fuck the hell out of them. Like, just, fuck them till they can't, they're dehydrated. Go out there and do your part. People who read books and shit, those bookworms, fuck them. Fuck the hell out of them. Go out there. Give them the evolutionary reward, or whatever the case may be. Do your part, ladies and gentlemen. Because it's rough out there, and it's going to get rougher, and people are making some pretty dire decisions right now. There's some people that don't know what decision to make. And of course, this ties back into the whole I can't sleep shit. So the theme of this podcast is coping mechanisms, and I gave you a little glimpse into what kind of things I think about and many other people think about that stress them out, give them seemingly irrational anxiety. But I'm just telling you, pulling together, trying to overlook some stuff, because believe me, if you think one person is terrible, there is worse. And I've experienced all kinds of the worst people. And it took me a long time to realize it, man. It did. And I think a lot of people also. And it'll stun you into a silence, into a cold depression. So that's reality. And a lot of people will seek therapy, and it works, and that's fine. I'm just trying to provide, not only for myself, but for other people out there that might have these thoughts and just can't seem to bring it out in any way. Maybe they're not even artistic or articulate enough. Whatever reason, not because of energy, basically, just not having the energy. I'm giving you that. And I want you to take it, put it in a box if you have to, and keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on the reality. Keep the eye on the truth. It's a novelty, unfortunately, that's, it's exciting to me, the truth is. Reality is exciting, actually. Because we have gotten lucky with becoming these out of the food chain. And in the process of doing this in our evolutionary, we'll just say, even though I'm a fan of de-evolution myself. Like, really, Devo. I really think it is a real thing, and I say it a lot. And it's based off an old pamphlet, these illustrated pamphlets by this guy named P.H. Shattuck that were so bizarre. Like, he would do the tail of the mushroom, and it was and all these weird things that were kind of extreme, but there were some good points in it. And Mark Mothersbaugh and Jerry Casale, when they went to Kent State University, Devo, they took that and reorganized it into music, into a multimedia thing. their belief is the only real change that can happen is through the subconscious nature. I think they're right, and I think Devo is right. That's another phrase you can Google. Devo was right. But basically, my interpretation of that is peaks and valleys. The human evolutionary thing has its de-evolutionary thing. Peaks and valleys, and I think we're sliding down a valley right now. And much like a theme park, eventually we'll go back up the peak. It's just a matter of patience and whether or not we're going to live long enough to see it. But sleep, who needs it? I certainly haven't gotten enough of it, and I don't think I've consistently slept well since probably I was a kid. And a lot of that has to do with all kinds of stuff, but mainly just the way I'm built, the genetics. Also, I have a brown dog that likes to keep me up sometimes with his nonsense and his rants about stuff too. But yeah, anyway, I know on this podcast I say a bunch of outrageous shit. Stuff is just straight up blunt or even crazy. But I say these things with the most honesty, and I come from with as much experience and just observation, and it's not really to insult anyone, and I'm sure some people will feel insulted or belittled by it, or that the stuff I'm saying is condescending, and there's some cases where I will get angry about something, and I will say something condescending towards a subject or someone or something like that, but it's just, that's nature. I mean, we're all like that. It's extraordinarily hard to be a humble man. It's extraordinarily hard to be civil and fair. I mentioned learned abilities a lot. These are abilities that are almost superhero in scope to be able to perform consistently. Because at the end of the day, I really would like conflict to just become more rational. Because there's no way you're going to get rid of conflict and awful things that people do to each other. There's things, it's like that's the problem with the political ideologies, is in essence each one of them represents something to change behavior, and I don't really think that's going to happen through people stomping their feet and screaming at each other on the news or on the internet. It's just the same old stuff that's been happening for thousands of years with us and our tribe building and all that stuff, and during those times, back when, a lot of it had to do with survival. It was just necessity. We didn't have the sophisticated infrastructures and shit that we have now. We just didn't know any better. But that's what got us here, though. That's the strange part. We have to acknowledge and respect that our grotesque nature enough to understand. I'm not saying that should always live completely in the past all the time, but we should be able to observe it. In observing the past, though, or history, you do notice patterns. It's just there's different circumstances in those patterns, but there's always going to be a pattern. Certain things rise, certain things fall, and when certain things come into place and become the norm, there's generally a body count behind that. There's a lot of sacrifices involved in this experience. This evolution, this regression or progression, I don't know. It depends on who you ask. The problem with getting into philosophy and art or poetry is oversimplifying stuff, oversimplifying complex issues. That's something mathematicians and scientists try to do all the time. They try to come up with what they believe is a simple equation, which to them might be, but to others, E equals MC squared is the most complex but yet simple equation that I can think of off the top of my head. It's a cliche and typical one, but it's a good example. That's Einstein. That's what makes Einstein, and me, and you, all that stuff. It's what sets him apart from the rest. Thing is I think coping mechanisms, people aren't getting enough sleep, so this is an incremental thing that I think is really fucking the social fabric up, and everybody has to have something, like really. Some people are better at moderating that something, and some people aren't. And I think most people are not built to handle those things and moderate them very well. We're only an nth degree away from being just complete fucking werewolf-like vampire beast. It's all circumstantial, and the environment determines all that stuff. At some point, the vulnerability of our environment becomes exposed, and maybe all it takes is a few clicks on a mouse or a few flicks of a switch, and all of a sudden we're back in the Stone Age for a while. And again, it's like what the George Carlin bit. Again, he had a bit about that, and I think it was, no, Life is Worth Losing, 2006, I think. I want to say that's the name of the special. There's a lot of things, man. We don't listen to people sometimes, and I find that to be kind of scary, because whether it is a comedian or people that have gotten into politics and shockingly have shed some light on some important issues, those guys are martyrs, man. Really, I mean, they end up bringing something to the table, whether it's for entertainment value or for whatever, and it's just kind of like, well, okay, well, that's interesting. Or it's so overwhelming that people are just kind of frozen. And it's like, there's nothing we can do about that. And I don't know how to react to that. And it happens. I think it's happening less now than it did before the big revolution of smartphones and all that stuff, which is strange. The problem with the internet, obviously, is just, it's harder to determine credibility with certain sources, but it's something you have to do on your own. You have to use your instinct, even though our instincts, again, this is the pros and cons. Our instincts also are just shitty liars and gets us in some very precarious situations and puts us in danger, especially if alcohol involved and other substances. Eventually, these podcasts are going to just venture off to lunacy, because I believe that maybe opinions are just that, and I don't think opinions are affecting the situation as much. At least I don't know about it, not from my end. I think it takes certain pedigree and certain education for people to be like, all right, taking him, okay, he's serious, even though you just heard the same thing that person had proclaimed by 20 other people in your life. You just didn't take them seriously, or didn't look or listen. And that's an unfortunate thing. Hindsight 2020. Hindsight is a motherfucker.